Could you explain the genesis of the Global Consciousness Project?
The Global Consciousness Project is phase 3 in my research history. First, at the Pear Lab in Princeton, I did, with the team there, research on how intention might reach out and touch things in the real world. And we found that if you ask people to change the behavior of a random number generator, random event generator, they can do it. It's a small effect, but it's impressive, and you just do a lot of repetitions, replications. And that led to experiments with other kinds of machines, but it also led to the idea of doing work in the field, using miniaturized versions of these random number generators. Take them out in the field with, most of my work was done with a palm-top computer. People don't know about that these days. And we don't yet have really a good random number generator for iPhones. But if you take one of these devices into the field and take it to a group, which is having a ritual or a concert where everybody is deeply engaged, the prediction we made and confirmed ultimately was that group consciousness, even though people didn't know the instrument was even there, no intention involved, that group consciousness coherence could change the way the machine produced its data. And that in turn led to some questions about what if you have two or several of these devices, and what if they're far from the so-called event? And so we spread a bunch of them around the world in what's now called the Global Consciousness Project. It was first called the Egg Project because it was a little bit of an analog to something like an EEG net, but for the globe. So we put random number generators as much as we could all around the world and gathered the data and asked a similar kind of question. What happens if there's a really big event that brings tremendous numbers of people into the same frame of mind, into a kind of coherent state of consciousness? And what happens is that, again, the data change from random. They have a very small, low-level structure, which requires statistical analysis to see, but it's a change that should not happen to true random number generators. And so we don't know the reason why these things happen, but we see a correlation between the big events that cause shared emotion and the changes in the data. So we wind up essentially having to conclude that there is something like a mass consciousness which can be registered in a way, even though nobody knows they're part of it. We're registering a kind of interconnection among people, usually driven by powerful events that really cause people to have the same emotions and share those at the same time.
So you said that the Global Consciousness Project was inspired by the writings of Teilhard de Chardin. What were those ideas, and how do you think your research relates to the ideas of Teilhard?
Yes, I probably would not ever have thought of this kind of the global experiment, except that I had read Teilhard de Chardin, whose Phenomenon of Man and The Future of Man. Those books were, to me, powerful descriptions of what might be. And what he was saying is that while we have a pretty good understanding or a good model about evolution, most people seem to think that it's finished. But his idea, and I agree with him, it's not finished. Yeah. We have another phase that is easy to see as the next step in human evolution. And that is to, in some sense, come together, to integrate as humanity and become a layer of intelligence for the Earth, a kind of what he called noosphere, a sphere of knowing.
Teilhard supposed the existence of a goal-directed teleological evolution of consciousness. Do you think the evolution of consciousness has a goal in a cosmic sense? And if so, what do you think it is?
Well, I'm not as deeply spiritual as Teilhard, but I think he's right. When we speak of these kinds of things, we use the language that we have. My language is a little different from his. I think we are destined to either become this layer of intelligence for the Earth, collaborating to do the job that we are best fit to do, which is monitor and enable and protect the Earth, which is the home we have, the only home. And Teilhard's idea is more, as you said, teleologically driven, something along the lines of God has determined that we will rise to the level of the Omega. And that may be so, but Teilhard says someplace, don't be impatient. It may take 10,000 years. What I hope is that there is a possibility, because of the great intelligence humans have, of doing something that I think is properly called conscious evolution. We could, and we can, anytime, decide to work on it, decide to become more like the potential that we easily perceive that we have. At the present time, we're not even close. But many people are on the path and are seeking ways to help us all develop our potential and become this noosphere that Teilhard envisioned. And the Global Consciousness Project's probably its main value, in my estimation, is showing that this is not an impossible dream, that there actually is evidence now that we do that sometimes. We aren't aware of it, but if we became aware, don't you think it might be possible that we could work on this conscious evolution, or some kind of evolution?
What do you think Psi reveals about the nature of consciousness?
The idea that Psi actually can manifest seems to me to be a very, very powerful insight into something that we might call the edges of what we know about consciousness. I mean, it's clear that Psi is part of or requires consciousness to become manifest. And on the other hand, most people thinking about consciousness don't include that. We should. Psi is right at the edge and is at the leading edge of what consciousness is about. And I think what it means is that we shouldn't think of consciousness as confined to the skull or inside the body. Instead, we should understand that Psi lives in the world, lives in the larger world. It extends out, it interacts, mine with yours, with everybody's. Most of the time we're not doing the same thing, and we're not synchronized or coherent, and so the consciousness that we each manifest interpenetrates without interaction. But sometimes we fall in love, for example. This interpenetration will suddenly become an interaction, so we have something new, a consciousness of two. And if it's a group doing a ritual is designed to bring us together and create a group consciousness. And that manifests in the world in a kind of physical way. Our experiments are designed, in sometimes somewhat unconsciously, but they're designed to capture a little bit of that, to get some evidence that will lead us to understand better what it means for to have consciousness, for consciousness to live in the world. It lives in the world, not inside our heads.
So, would you describe consciousness as non-local?
Well, sometimes I have, I once had a business card that said language bewitches intelligence. Didn't have any phone numbers on it. That's a paraphrase from Wittgenstein. So I had it to remind me that I have to be careful. What does non-local mean? You know, and non-local means something to me and means something different to somebody else. Physicists are a little upset with parapsychologists or psi researchers for using the term non-local to describe the phenomena that we in the research business are looking at. But if we are careful and sensible about the use, what it means is a little bit like what I was saying before, that consciousness is not localized inside my body or not behind my third eye. It is out in the world. It's non-local, and it can manifest, we have experiments that show it. It can manifest very much non-locally in the sense that something far away, an REG or a person with, might be tapped into or touched somehow by a consciousness here. That's a non-locality in space. There's also non-locality in time that our experiments show exists. We have experiments where the effect that I want to manifest will be manifest tomorrow. Random number generators will change their behavior when they are run tomorrow. Could be yesterday. And we don't have to be there here and now. It can be non-local.
Do you think the brain might serve more like a transceiver than the organ of consciousness?
Wow. The question of whether the brain, how the brain is linked and involved in or with consciousness is a difficult one. I'm personally convinced that they're kind of part and parcel. There's not really any sensible, useful way to separate brain and consciousness. But on the other hand, I don't believe that consciousness is simply a so-called epiphenomenon. You turn the neurons sufficiently and you get consciousness. I did think that when I was very young. I thought a coalescence of coincidences and whatnot would produce consciousness. And now I think consciousness may be, and this is partly because of the psi research and also philosophical considerations, that there is something about consciousness which is not just like a sputtering of chemicals and electrical pulses in neural matter. Instead, it seems to be more coherent and comprehensive in its manifestation, in its presence in the world. It, for example, seems to be able to do something without pushing the buttons to move muscles or speak. It can directly change the behavior of a random number generator. It can directly learn something about what somebody else will be seeing 1,000 miles away tomorrow. And this suggests to me that there's way more to consciousness than just the meat, the 3 pounds or whatever of meat stuck in here.
Can you speak to how tiny effects, psi effects, may compound?
One of my personal missions, I guess, as a researcher in parapsychology is to think about the small size of the effect. Is that meaningful? How should we interpret that? And what we know from long, long years of research is that if you have a tiny effect and it's repeatable, doesn't matter that it's tiny, it becomes very, very clear that it's a real effect ultimately. If you do the replications, you will find that the tiny effect, because it's structured, will be gradually rising out of the noise, which is unstructured. The noise washes out. When you repeat the experiment, the noise, because it has no pattern, will just gradually cancel. but the signal, if you will, the psi effect, does have structure, and so it builds gradually. If there's anything consistent about it, if it's real in the sense of a real effect in the world, it'll have to reveal itself. There's a kind of long-term corollary to that, which is about science, in the general sense. Science makes mistakes. Scientific research is by no means always, directly right on and correct. Instead, what we have to do is recognize that what's true will eventually rise up out of the noise, and what's false will just fade away. It will disappear into the mud.
What do you think is the relationship between biological evolution and the evolution of consciousness?
There's a question that we should pay attention to, the relationship between biological and conscious evolution. I think they're quite distinct in principle. We haven't, as a species, yet really properly learned that distinction. And in fact, I think biological evolution, which is slow and progressive and ultimately leads to a more fit and productive or capable animal or being, in the case of humans, I guess. That all proceeds at its pace. But conscious evolution or evolution of consciousness could be very different. As it is, I think we already are moving along rather more quickly in terms of consciousness evolution than biological evolution. It's clear, in a sense, if you look at just the recent history of humans on, the last couple of thousand years. There are leaps and bounds, and there is something like a doubling, almost like computer chips. But there's also kind of a missing element. Biological evolution is probably guided in some sense by the nature of the organism, whatever organism, by the conditions on the planet. Conscious evolution is not so limited, but it's also not so guided. So it's an interesting situation in which there's a kind of necessity, I think, for us to recognize that this is it's a feedback loop, and we have a kind, not only a possibility, but a responsibility for paying attention to this conscious evolution. Are we going in a direction that's healthy and ultimately to the benefit of humanity or the planet or whatever, or perhaps not?
What do you think is the far future of consciousness in the universe?
Well, the far future of consciousness in the universe is a really interesting kind of question for which I have almost no personal answer. For that, I look to people who actually spend their lives thinking about those kinds of questions. And I think there is, we've mentioned Teilhard de Chardin. His vision is one that I personally like very much. Don't know if it'll happen, but I think it would be wonderful. Basically to evolve. Consciousness should evolve to become a kind of unitary consciousness. And I think that's not only a desirable goal, it's reasonable, and moreover, it fits the insights of every sage who ever speaks about it in any culture from time immemorial. We have never had any culture in which the people, the wise ones, did not say, we are one. I think that's the future of evolution. It's the ground of evolution of consciousness. And in a certain sense, we really are already there.